So, as usual, we have a PowerPoint presentation.
Sure.
Well,
Pull it up.
Let me, are we gonna be able to broadcast this on the screen?
are we going to be able to see?
Can you see it? I shared it.
No, it's not you. It's us. It's our screen isn't working. It's not you.
No, I understand. Yep. Thanks for clarifying them.
Jim, well, we got a few minutes here to sort this out. I have a general question for you, and that deals with procedure.
Okay?
The procedure that I'm wondering about is, how do you envision, if we read these drafts that you're turning out, which cover a multiplicity of subjects, and to my way of thinking, have a considerable number of edits required. There's a lot of typos, and there's various edits, and there's corrections, and is that something that we will do, that we're responsible to do as a committee? And if so, how do you see that happening?
What I see happening is that we will get, if you guys can put those comments in the Excel spreadsheet that we posted for comments, then we will take those and incorporate them into the drafts and update the drafts.
I'm just thinking that could be quite cumbersome, because there's a lot of just typos, and if we start going, third paragraph, page 26, fifth word should be X or Y. Can we get a single draft document, perhaps, total, that we can work over and do it in some way such as that? Because I think it's going to be extremely cumbersome to try and identify every word that's wrong, and I'm afraid I'm quite a pedant at heart. I'd like it to be accurate.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, it needs to be accurate.
I've printed most of them. Most of them are not complete, and it says that there's more to come on a number of them. But so when it ends, it's going to be a fair number of pages, and I'm quite happy to go through all those pages. But I just soon not have to print them all. If you can print them, if you've got some kind of a high speed something or other that you can just turn out a draft copy for me.
So are you proposing that we give you guys hard copies of the sections, and then you will edit them by hand?
Well, I was going to do that. I do that mostly anyways, the way I usually work. Others, you may not need one for everybody. I would have to see, who wants to do this and who doesn't. I mean, there's just a lot of things like South Hamilton's in there and things like that, where it's a lot easier just to line it out than to go through a long explanation as to where specifically in the document this is to be found.
Yeah, there was at one point we had talked about taking them individually and doing edits and track changes, which is another way to do it.
Yeah.
But if it's if you guys need to have hard copies, then we can do that too, I suppose.
I mean, we could have a editing committee too, and for those who'd like to do it, we'll go through one document and correct the whole thing. But I mean, there's various things. I noticed today, talking about services, that the police run the ambulance. They haven't run the ambulance now for
how many years?
10 years or something like that. It's the fire department, I believe, but these are things that I'd like to make
Can
sure
I
to
just,
correct.
I'm sorry, I actually was not here at the our last meeting, but before that, we had a pretty lengthy conversation, I think, about this topic, and I thought we had decided we were going to use that document, and that it's up to, when I did mine, I went in and I did what you're, right? And you did, I know you did too.
Well, maybe that's the way to do it. We could collect all those up in one document or something of that nature.
Well, my Jim, if you're there, I don't want, I just thought that was what we had decided, and
Well,
that Jim was going to collect.
that. I think that's fine. We can go ahead with that for sure. And if they can pick all those up and then maybe we just edit the final document or something along that line. Maybe that's an easier way to do it.
I think Jim made the suggestion that don't worry about the typos, they're gonna pick those up down the line. I think that was what he commented. But,
Right, but things that are more substantive or,
substantive ones, yes.
yeah, or that they wouldn't have a way of picking up that they don't know.
Right.
Like your
Exactly,
comment
like
about the ambulance.
the business about the police and the ambulance, that isn't something that we'd be able to figure out otherwise.
That's the kind of thing that I maybe thrash out. Maybe maybe we take all the comments that come in, incorporate all of those, bring the document to as close to perfection as you think you can do it, and then maybe it's the time to do a final cut and just double check everything, because
Yep.
I just have a feeling a lot's going to get missed, and I don't want the document to be less than perfect.
Right. So I think it might have been Dana and Emil who were talking about this before, but yeah, we had had this discussion previously, and I think we decided to that Kristen had suggested the Excel. Kristen Kasner had suggested the Excel spreadsheet, and so we'd agreed to do that, and so that's what's posted there. If you're comfortable with doing that, Jack, and not, you also feel comfortable with not necessarily doing, very detailed editing at this point, but sort of more general. I think it would be very helpful to get that, just like I think it was Dana who was suggesting that.
Well, I think it's fine. No, I mean, I don't want to interdict that process, and if that's now in train, let's go ahead, and your folks can get it as close to where they think it's accurate. I just want to make sure the facts are all straight at the end.
Absolutely.
So I'll do a final run through.
Okay. All right, and I have to let you all know tonight, I do have a hard stop at 7:30.
Okay.
So I think the agenda we have set for tonight will still allow us to do that. It's will advance the way it's supposed to. So just kind of going through this quickly. Opening and agenda review, 5 minutes for that. We'll go over the project status, comments on the Google Docs. That should end. Action workshop. Actually, we will do the comments on the Google Docs. It'll go a lot quicker than 15 minutes because we don't really have any new ones. And we'll reserve that time for the action workshop. Confirming the next meeting and agenda and committee business. And we should be able to get through this, I think, fairly quickly. Any questions about the agenda before we move on?
No.
No.
Great. So quick update here. Chapters that we have posted currently are land use, economic development, natural resources, cultural resources, cultural and historic resources, community services and facilities, and transportation with comment tracking sheet. Have been getting some good comments in there. Again, Emil and Dana have been very vigilant about that, which is excellent. That's very helpful. We could definitely use comments from other folks too, if you have time to get in there and do your homework, so to speak. That'd be great. Survey data. So we're at about 239 responses. That was as of the last time we met. I don't think it's increased substantially since then. But I wasn't able to get into SurveyMonkey just before this evening. There was a technical issue with that. So that's why I put this in highlighted in yellow. So we think we're at about 239 and maybe a couple more than that. Before we move on from this, any additional comments on the survey or on the status?
Jim, are we going to correlate all of the various responses, or try to have a table or some context to measure?
Yeah, so we have a number, so we have virtually completed surveys, so online surveys, and then we have some hard copy ones. We have to figure out how to match those up because the hard copy versions are a little bit different than the SurveyMonkey versions. But David, yes, that is the intent, is to figure out how to match that up and provide a summary of that data.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide here. So the Google Drive, just a reminder that this is how you get there.
So, does he know, Jim, just to let you know, we aren't able to see you. So I don't know. That's not you. It's on our end.
Are you able to see the presentation?
No.
Oh,
No, it's not you. It's not you.
no, understood. For the moment, that's not a huge problem, but in a couple of minutes, it'll make it difficult well, we'll figure out a way to do it. But thank you for letting me know. All right, so I won't read out the individual letters of the Google Drive or anything like that. Just suffice to say that the link hasn't changed, and you should be able to still access that if you want. If you need the link or you're having trouble getting into it, please let us know and we'll see what we can do to help you out. The comments that we've received are pretty much the same type of comments that we had received previously, which include some typos and graphical edits, word choices, map clarifications, things of that nature. So, again, we've been getting some good stuff from Dana and Emil that we'll incorporate. And, we look forward to getting comments from the rest of you as well. So the next thing that I wanted to do was
Jim, can I just get
the implementation plan and do some action planning. So one of the things that we did just very recently was we took the action planning, the results of the action planning exercise that we did at the last meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, and we took some of the information that we had, some of the analysis that we had done from the land use existing conditions report, and we kind of married these things together with just our general experience and knowledge of how other communities like Hamilton have put together action plans in the past. And so what I am going to do, folks who are virtually present, I'm assuming you guys can see what I'm presenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know.
You can.
Yeah. On what I was.
So I'm going to pull up.
Everybody should go home and just do this. I'm trying. It's not connecting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not.
Oh, boy. Let's see.
Or do you need to know the password?
No, I just won't. It's just not connecting me for some reason.
So I will share this around to folks after the meeting. But we did put together a list of goals, policies, and actions, just sort of some proposed ones that I wanted to go over with all of you and get some input on them. And again, these are kind of a marriage of the ones that we had from the last meeting. So the action plan that we did for land use at the last meeting, and the results of our land use existing conditions analysis previously. And so these are laid out as goals and actions. And we heard, I think from the last meeting, from the action planning, as well as from the visioning that we did back in November, that there were a number of key features that the town really wants to protect. You know, you like your scenic areas, you like your open spaces, undeveloped land, and various other features around the community, such as hills, the trees, the farms, etc. And so we, you know, we know it's important to highlight those as part of land use management and zoning. And so we're proposing some approaches to do that. And so what I'm going to do is begin by just kind of reading through goals that you know, we've written up for you folks as a starting point, and then get some comments back from all of you, and then talk a little bit more about the actions that we have proposed here, and you know, get feedback on that. And then for the next meeting, we'll, you know, between now and the next meeting, we'll turn this into an action plan using that action planning template, the implementation plan template, and provide that to all of you for review. And hopefully we'll be able to do this with the facilities and services section as well, do some of that this evening as well. But let's start with the land use. So goals that we have. So we listed 3, and they include achieving a balanced, orderly, and harmonious land use pattern that preserves current residential densities, historic and cultural resources, supports appropriate economic growth, provides ample recreation and open space, protects the natural environment, and supports a high quality of life for the residents. So that first one, that's kind of like an overarching statement, and the idea there is recognizing, you know, the intent of the town to protect what it has. The second one that we had, and the next 2 were a little more specific. The second one that we had says protect the quality of the natural resources by appropriately managing land use in the community. So again, this focus is really on the natural environment. We know that that's quite important to you folks, and important to the way the town has grown up over the years. And the third one is improving the tax base and providing jobs through development of land that is consistent with the master plan, zoning bylaw, and land development regulations. Again, key features here that we're trying to include in some of the statements about protecting include scenic areas, open spaces and parks, undeveloped land, hills and ridges, old growth trees, gateway areas, and farms. So before we go into actions, for those goals, I'd like to you know, maybe have a little dialogue with all of you about whether you feel like these are appropriate, whether you'd like to add to them, if you see anything that you think ought to be done differently.
Can I ask just maybe a question? And the answer is probably no, as I'm thinking about this.
No, go right ahead.
I was wondering if there's an opportunity in these goals to maybe be even more specific, because, you know, in the blue box, one of the key features to protect is undeveloped land, but then the third goal is to develop land. And so those are in conflict with one another. And so if in the goal you had like a, you know, develop a certain percentage of developable land or something like that, that made it more specific, then it wouldn't be in conflict with one another. So maybe that's not where you do it. Maybe you're more specific in the actions, but I just wanted to highlight that some of that just seems in conflict with each other. And is there a way to make something more specific so that it is clear that you can do both? Because you can.
Yeah.
But should we be more specific in what we mean?
Yeah, so that's a great comment. So the first goal kind of attempts to do that by saying achieve a balanced, orderly, and harmonious land use pattern. But as you're pointing out, the third one is really much more focused on developing tax base and jobs and land development. We could certainly make the statement, something to the effect of, but keeping aware or keeping avoiding conflict with key features to protect.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay? Can I ask a question? So I just wanted to say, this is Dana, by the way. First of all, I think all of us here in the room, everybody is pulled up on Zoom, so everybody can, I think, see it on their phone. Oh no, Marnie is still can't get it. Oh, okay. All right, never mind. I guess not everybody's up. I wanted to ask, Kristen, to your point, I wanted to ask if it's not really just avoiding, is there a way to make it, and maybe we don't want to be too complicated, but it's not really just avoiding conflict, but is the goal that we preserve undeveloped land by thoughtfully developing other land? Like, I don't know if that even makes sense, but
So would you perhaps feel like that might be covered in this first goal statement?
Yeah, it might be. And I was only just kind of throwing that to Kristen, like, because I do see the conflict, but I also see that there is an opportunity to really see it as, by really thoughtfully developing some land, that is the way to preserve other land.
Yeah, Dana, I like that. And yes, I guess my short question is there a way to recommend a certain percentage of land that is developed or something like that, where again, it's a little more specific, but it's recognizing that we don't want to go from 0 to 60 and just develop like crazy, because there are key features of, our more rural setting and open space that we want to protect. So yeah, I mean, I think we can go a lot of different ways with this. I think the only other comment I will have, and then I will be quiet, is I sort of feel like, Jim, the first goal is more like a vision statement. Like it doesn't fit with the other two. I like the other two because they're short, they're easy to understand, and they're more specific. And that first one is just, there's a lot going on there. So maybe that belongs, in like the vision. Maybe we add like a vision statement or something, and it just doesn't feel as much of a goal as the other two do, to me.
I certainly have no problem with that. I'd just like to check in with others and see what they think.
Jim, if I may, revenue generation is at the heart of Hamilton's problems in terms of the one pot funding municipal schools, the tax burden, etc. And also there's the great impetus, I think the surveys will show, for preserving open space. So I'd like to carry the specificity approach even to a finer point, and that is commercial development. There are two sites that various committees are debating and looking at. One involves where the current Winthrop School is downtown, and that presumes that a new school is going to be built elsewhere, freeing up that property. And also there's a great deal of vacant land, Jack knows the acreage, at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, which may be appropriate for biolab or medical lab or other current development trends in the Commonwealth. To what extent can we ultimately narrow down the focus to that kind of specificity? But I want to make one other quick comment. The finance committee is undertaking an analysis of revenue generation, and very, very preliminary. We cannot, in a reasonable amount of time, generate revenue by housing. We have to concentrate on commercial development and basically large commercial development. So that's why I'm seeking to further the specificity argument to that finer point of those locations.
So, so what I would say, David, is, you know, I agree that those sorts of things should be in the plan too. You know, I know that those are particularly important to the town. I would put things that are as specific as what you just mentioned in the actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would observe that the second goal is really incorporated in the first goal. It's almost redundant, in my view. And the first goal is a visionary goal, but I think it is a goal that would be supported by the town. And to David's point, it might be that we could have goals for residential development and also goals for commercial development, with the commercial development emphasizing the tax base.
Yeah, I think one of the good things that came out of the survey was that, generally speaking, most of the surveys and many of the surveys I read identified commercial revenue as not only appropriate for the town, but probably in the best interest of the town as being the best bang for the buck, aside from residential. Some residential clearly has got to happen in some way, shape, or form because of 40B. And there will be other residential development, but it will not there probably will not be much beyond whatever we may be required as far as affordable is concerned, because affordable will involve a subsidy in order to make it affordable, probably from us. And so there's and as we, to the extent that we increase our residential, we obviously increase the number of affordable units as well, which is an outgo, which is a use of funds, not a source of funds. So commercial has the opposite opportunity. The big problem, I think, right now is that we can identify the two sites mentioned by David, but both are kind of hanging out there at the moment. And so should we better express it in general terms, saying that there is a recognition that we do need appropriate locations for commercial development of a significant nature to make a difference, a material difference in our revenue situation, without necessarily naming them and without eliminating greenfield sites at the same time. Because the plain and simple fact is, as far as residential is concerned too, is that land is so expensive in Hamilton that it's not going to produce, as I say, affordable housing without a fat subsidy.
So I'm actually, it sounds like we're getting into like a little bit of a discussion of action. So I'm going to, you know, I kind of pulled down to those just now. There is an action, I think, you know, that may cover what it is that Jack and David, the two of you, were thinking about. And so, so I wanted to, you know, basically read that to you. So action number 7 on this list says, identify specific sites and specific projects for the development of affordable housing, particularly those sites in close proximity to facilities and services. Now we could reword this a little bit. I know it's not exactly what you said, but I think it covers some of it.
Jack, Jim, I just want to emphasize to everyone that revenue generation is the foundational issue for Hamilton's future. It impacts the schools, it impacts the municipal side, affordable housing is going to happen, I assume, but that's not going to generate revenue. Market rate housing, according to the model that FinCom is working on, will not generate the net kind of positive revenue flow that Hamilton needs. It's really focusing on commercial development. And Jack, to your point about not being specific as to site, the plan we're working on is a 10-year implementation plan. That's plenty of time to capture the unknowns dealing with the two sites that I mentioned.
I would agree entirely, David. I think I guess I'm viewing what we're doing now in the master plan as being ultimately setting the stage for a strategic plan that would follow, at which point, hopefully, the situation would be clarified as to where the appropriate sites would be. I think of the visioning aspect of the thing now is that we don't want to be taking farmland, active farmland, or greenfield sites, and putting some factory in the middle of them. That's kind of where I'm going on this thing, and maybe we can't word it appropriately, but I think a little bit of obfuscation at this point as far as this plan is concerned. This is this 30,000 feet thing that Carolyn used to mention on a regular basis, that we're looking at everything from 30,000 feet. 30,000 feet doesn't give you much resolution at grade.
Yes, but municipal government thrives on vagaries, and we've got to focus and do so with some dispatch on these revenue generating potentials.
True. Absolutely true.
I would point out that, and not to minimize what it is that you're saying, David, because I agree with you that that's important, but there is a section of the plan that'll focus on economic development, and we are going to do that fiscal impact analysis that'll bring some focus on that too. And this is really much more focused on land use.
Right, but I don't know that that's separate and apart from commercial development.
It is commercial development's definitely part of that. How about this? How about I sort of go through these actions that we have listed here and see if we can see if some of them are covering the things that you're looking for, or if there are tweaks that can be made to one or more of these that would help get there, or whether we actually need to add another action or two.
Well, all right, I don't want, this horse is just about stopped breathing, but I've emphasized the revenue question, the need for crisp plans and relatively quick action. And at some point, I hope the committee comes to grips with this issue of recommending with specific site location reference commercial development. I'll stop now.
I would certainly not. I would certainly advocate for going after the sites that we're mentioning as hard and fast as we can. I'm not suggesting we're going to slacken off the effort in one way. I'm just wondering what the appropriate language might be at this point.
Sure.
Okay, let's go through what we have and see if there's stuff that we want to add into this. So we have 8 actions listed here. The first one is review and update the zoning for mixed-use development, balancing support for the expansion of business activity while maintaining village character and integrity. Second is review and modify the existing flexible zoning regulations to improve the application across and clarify the applicability requirements. Third is update land development regulations and zoning bylaw to reflect updated development practices and concepts. The fourth one is encouraging the appropriate utilization and expansion of existing business districts through updating and improving the regulatory framework and exploring opportunities to establish additional business and mixed-use zoning districts. Review and assess the existing residential zoning districts. Consider the adoption of conservation development or a similar growth, smart growth tool to provide for more thoughtful and environmentally sensitive development. That seventh one that I read already, I'll just go through it again. Identify specific sites and specific projects for development of affordable housing, particularly those sites in close proximity to facilities and services. And 8, consider allowing additional uses for and within estate and institutional properties. I think that might get at a couple of the properties that have been mentioned here. And their existing buildings to preserve the character of the estate while broadening the tax base.
So I think, Jim, this is Kristen. So some of these are, for some of these you have kind of a what and a why, but others you don't. So, you know, so if you take the first one, review and update zoning for mixed-use development. Why? To balance support for the expansion of business activity. But something like review and assess existing residential zoning districts, that's the what. Why? What? I don't know, I just think in actions it should be what is it and why. I mean, not super specific, but at least a what and a why, like, so you know what the action is.
Sure.
And if, the other thing, and I apologize, I can't really read what the list is here that Kristen has, but there are, in the environmental aspects of these things, land acquisition is going to be an extremely difficult task for the town to take on, given conditions at the present time. But to the extent that wildlife corridors have to be maintained, it's something that there should be some attention given to that and a priority accorded accordingly. Should there be, you know, large estates start to fall hither, thither, and yon. I mean, these are things that have got to be kept in mind as well. To have a sterile environment out there where the deer can't go more than 10 feet in any direction doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, hard as it may be to finance and to sell to the public, and I'm sure that would be the case, these are things that should be just kind of kept in mind. I'm not quite sure how the language might run on that as well.
Well, I think the language is really heavy. I mean, I know we were just talking about we need to say more about, you know, concentrated commercial development, but this is almost a lot of concentrated commercial development discussion, a little bit of housing, and actually not much open space and wildlife in terms of, and that, so I do think an action to back up what Jack's saying on here should reflect that conversation.
I think that was the point I wanted to make also, that there's some reference in the second goal, to protecting natural resources, but there's really nothing beyond, there's nothing very specific and concrete about that. And there are some smaller things that towns do in order to take a look at the ecological health of their community, and generally conservation efforts and protection of natural resources. And there were a lot of issues that came up in those discussions earlier on about lighting and solar and all kinds of stuff. The Conservation Commission, on which I sit, is really taken up with very regulatory business. It's not a lot of education. It's not a lot of, it doesn't have the breadth and scope that other towns have to look at issues of, broader issues of ecological health in the town.
Are you interacting with the planning board in that manner? Because I think I anticipate a lot of redrafting of bylaws as we have them now, because as we have them now, they promote sprawl. And so I think that an interaction between the CONSCOM and the planning board would be a very helpful way to go at it.
The action steps then.
Yeah.
Right. something like that, but also, I'm not sure what other towns have, but I think they have a broader array of positions to assist residents in understanding and responding to issues that come up, and to be proactive.
I think you're right about that. I saw the general heading of protecting the open spaces and so forth, but we don't have an action plan that specifically pertains to that, so that's something that we could edit into
Rosie.
that.
Yeah, so I missed a couple of the actions that we have listed here, and I just want to add those in because I think they'll help with some of the discussion here. Apologize for that, but one of them was to investigate options to expand wastewater capacity. Another one was consider options such as form-based code and adding concise standards with flexibility.
I don't know.
The next one was
I'm sorry, I actually
mapping-
don't know what that means.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Map ecologically sensitive areas to determine their locations and define where development is appropriate. And the final one was engage the community and stakeholders to work towards creating a vision for the future of the town with implementable goals, policies, and actions. So going back to the form-based code one, this gets at form-based code is intended to provide for a certain aesthetic character. So it is code. Not sure how much these words are going to mean to you folks, and so I'd be happy to explain them if it's too much planner talk. But they are standards that are focused on performance. So form-based code focuses on the aesthetic performance of a built area or an area that is to be built, so that it has a consistent character, and it gives the folks who are doing the development a large amount of flexibility to work and build what it is that they want to, as long as they maintain those standards. So a lot of zoning standards and development standards are very specific. They'll tell you exactly how far the setback is, and they'll do other sorts of restrictions like that. Form-based code is more interested in the sort of the more aesthetic quality of what it is that is being built. Does that explain a little bit or help?
Sure, yes, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
One thing I was going to note is that we'll put in, if we're going to keep this action, we'll put in more explanation into the plan itself, and perhaps into the action part of the plan as to what this means, because I know it's kind of, like I said, I know it's kind of planner language.
I think saying form-based in an action like this is too specific. I mean, I think we need to consider a range of regulatory tools to achieve our goals. I'm not sure, and I mean, you could say such as something like form-based, but I don't know. I just feel like it kind of lose people quickly.
Well, it does say that. It actually says consider options such as, so.
Yeah, I don't know, but it consider options such as for concise standard and flexibility, but in what? You haven't said like in the regulatory tools that we have, so somewhere.
Yeah, so we can add some other examples in there and some more explanation around that.
Or just diverse regulatory options.
Okay.
To have flexibility and, I mean, I don't know. I don't think your goal is really for us to kind of like necessarily nitpick, but kind of overall to kind of, are we in agreement with kind of the direction here?
Guidance.
Yes.
Okay.
Guidance.
Yeah, Jim, this is Emil Dellenquist. I like a lot of what you put together here. I think this is a great beginning, and I think it's going to be good to look at the whole picture, because this particular land use part of the code is the one that really integrates pretty firmly with all of the other elements. And to see how that works out in the end is going to be a matter, I think, once everything is sort of fleshed out a little bit and you have the overall picture, we can start to tailor it a little bit more to what's missing, what needs to be added or changed on that. I think it's a pretty good start, though.
Thanks. Thanks, I really appreciate that. And your ideas from the last meeting were helpful in guiding this.
And I actually really appreciate this form-based idea, because that really provides developers with flexibility, but it would preserve the character of the town and improve its aesthetic. Because I think that we could probably all agree that Cumberland Farms has done nothing to improve the aesthetic of our town. In fact, quite the contrary, in my personal view. So I think that Emil, you may have mentioned that at one time at a planning board meeting, but both Emil and I have a background in historic preservation. Mine is way back, and Emil's is, that was his career. But I think that is something we could use for in the downtown area in particular. And when you look at a plan that's 20 years out, you know, who's to say that Willow Street, you know, where the Dodge Tree is now, could change hands, and so there are opportunities beyond just Gordon Conwell and the Winthrop School area that we need to consider. You know, we can't be too specific because obviously things change, but the downtown area, particularly those sites, could be a really appropriate area for some innovative kinds of buildings that had commercial potential and also residential potential, market rate housing, and so that's my thinking. And again, I reiterate the support for this concept. I think it's really great, and it's flexible, and
Yep.
that's.
Yeah, I know the word is not familiar to a lot of people, but the real key here is that it's a prescriptive code, and it's put together by the town, by the people who live here. And that's the big difference from current zoning regulations, where a developer can come to town, make a presentation on a project, and then the town has to evaluate it. It's a very reactive process. When you look at a form-based code, it's turning everything upside down. Now the town is very active in deciding what it wants, how big, how small, and that's the real key here. That's why the real value of it, and I think it's worth mentioning those words, because that's, as far as I know, the only way you can do it right now.
So it means the developer comes in and he's on notice from the get-go.
Well, what it does is give, actually, it helps developers a lot, because they know what they have to do to get an approval. And that is the single thing every single developer wants, is an approval when they go in for a project. And if the town spends the effort in planning, and it's gonna cost a little bit of money, and design of the downtown, it's not strictly aesthetics, it really is about building a community. And that's really the point of the whole master plan. It's building a community, not just economic development, not just any one of these things, not just housing, it's building a community, not a suburb. And I think what we need to do is look at the whole picture, and this is the key section to me in the whole master plan, and how we want to grow in the future. So I think the neat thing about with the developer is that once he sees what the town wants, he can develop that if it's in his interest to do it, and the approval is going to be almost automatic. It's going to be almost an executive decision, and that's how easy it can be for a developer, instead of going through this trial and error kind of process we use now in most zoning regs.
So Emil, I completely agree with you and Marnie, but I think we should say what you said, not say, consider options.
Yeah.
Consider options is maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But what you're saying is the town should take a proactive approach to institute more flexible and
Correct.
zoning codes that can better determine the outcome of what we're looking for.
Correct.
But say that, I mean, this is like, oh, yeah, maybe we should do this, maybe we shouldn't, but we need to take, if we want this outcome, we need to take
Yeah,
a proactive approach.
I think it's a great
to
comment. I think
management.
that's the sort of thing I think Jim is asking for.
Yeah.
He sort of dropped the idea out there, and now we have to explain it in a better way or a different way, so that it's something people who read us can
Right.
understand what's actually happening.
And,
So you
and
can
I have just one more point, and that's the use of the term regulations and bylaws. Because actually, our bylaws are the laws. Some of the bylaws will refer or incorporate by reference certain regulations. But when a developer or anyone in town goes to, for a variance or for a development, they have to abide by our bylaws. And any reference to regulations is almost, it's confusing, because the regulations aren't going to give someone a permit. It's the bylaw, adherence to the bylaw, that will give someone a permit, whether it's a special permit or as of right subdivision, but it is the bylaw that will control, not any particular regulation. So that's a semantic comment, but it's an important one, I think.
And we don't have to wait for this master plan to come out to begin that process. What kind of a timeline do you anticipate?
Well, we're starting our discussion on May 17th, so
Time's passing.
what's that? Fast track it?
I just want to really, I think, Kristen, you nailed it there. I think saying we want, the action step really should say something like proactively create, I don't even know, appropriate zoning, and I think that's exactly right, that it is, that, and I like the word proactive, and that should be a priority and an action step. I agree.
I liked what you said too, and I kind of lost the end of it, Kristen. You said the town should take a proactive approach and what were the other words?
I think I kind of trailed off just because I was trying to make it fit with everything else. But no, but just the words "consider options" is, no one's going to do it. But town town must take whatever you want to do. But the town should take a proactive approach to updating the bylaw,
Zoning bylaw.
the zoning bylaw to allow for more concise standards with flexibility to meet the goals outlined, in this whole document. But it's the town the town shall, it's not, oh, something will happen, they'll come up and someone will do it. It's, we need to do this.
Yes.
And that proactive preface, Jim, might apply to other numbered items in the action plan.
Sure.
Yeah, I think
Instead of consider, et cetera.
Yep, we can take out the sort of phrasing that is focused on considering, and I don't know, sometimes I've heard those referred to as weasel words.
Yeah.
You can get rid of the weasel words and make them more active if you want.
I'm all for eliminating weasel words, Jim.
I don't even know what that means, but I don't.
Hack them out.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Only kidding.
So is it appropriate to say within this definition to site appropriate? Is that part of it, or is that still too nebulous?
That's fairly subjective. That's the only problem,
Right,
but,
right,
yeah.
But I mean, the whole thing is, but if we could just take the concept as defined by Emil, and for Kristen, that's good, that's what we want,
I
right?
think if you said site-specific, rather than site-appropriate, because then it basically, it doesn't make the evaluation, but it says somebody has to.
Wouldn't that, I'm not sure I'm following, wouldn't that be related to the zoning? Is that,
Well, it
is that
does
what you're
allow-
saying?
Amy's the expert on this.
Well, not an expert, but I think as part of the master plan, there's going to be an evaluation about what areas should be considered for more flexible zoning. So I think it's going to be specific about an area, not so much about what would be there, but because the opportunities are going to change over the next couple of years. And so I think that's the way to go. So it should be part of this master plan to identify parts of the town that might be amenable to this kind of change. So I think that'll happen at the right point.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of that's going to be guided by the the present structure of conservation restrictions and things of this nature, which I think is going to limit your flexibility on that. Some of them are perhaps revocable, though, and maybe that's a question. I hope they're not, but I mean that would come in if something's in perpetuity. It's very simple because that's going to lay it out and will give you a blueprint for where to take it. But something to keep in mind.
When we talk about the mapping.
So one area that I'm thinking would really lend itself nicely to form-based code or something similar to that is the downtown. I don't know if you folks have other areas in mind like that where it might make sense.
I think Emil had talked about that in terms of the whole town. You divide it into sort of different areas. Well, he gave me a little tutorial that what you would allow in town, in downtown, isn't necessarily what you would allow out, say, a mile out of town. But still, there should be some boundaries and some guidelines, right? But you go ahead.
I'm just going to touch on it because this is the whole subject in itself. But the idea of a transect, Jim, you're probably familiar with that. It's a fascinating way to look at a town. If you want to identify what it is to be rural or urban, we don't have an urban here. Our urban is our downtown area, is as big as you're going to get. But the concept of the transect is a former ecological term that they would use to analyze. You could draw a line from, say, Crane Beach up to Mount Katahdin.
What's the word? Transit?
Transect.
Transect.
Transect. It's an
Okay.
ecological scientific expression on analyzing the flora and fauna every step of the way from, say, Crane Beach up to a mountain top and how it changes. And it's a fascinating way to look at a town because you can look at this town and draw your own transect here in town to determine everything from, say, Bradley Palmer, which is a preserve, no buildings in there, nothing, to the downtown area where you have commercial, residential, and so forth. And every step along the way, you can identify particular sectors. In this case, you could probably have 5 different ones that each have different characteristics so that when you develop in that particular area, you develop in a like-minded way. So that, and just as a rough example, if you have a, yeah, there it is.
There it is. Good
Yeah.
work, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. It's it's all the elements that you see on the landscape, and that's part of the form that we've been talking about. But it just as in a rural situation where you have swales alongside of the road, in a downtown area you have curbs. Now, it sounds minor, but these are all little elements that when put together form a particular environment that will give it a character, either built or unbuilt. And it's a fascinating way to do it, not hard, but you can, it is a good way rather than the one size fits all. Typically you get a zoning bylaw that maybe fits a general area, where what you need to do is identify particular character areas, why they look the way they do, and why it's meaningful to people. And that's how you can now start to capture what this town, why it looks the way it does. And it's an excellent way to go about it. And
Sounds perfect to me.
Isn't that great? Yeah, he explained it to me, and I thought it was super.
Yeah, we've been using an approach like that on another project that is specific to trying to update a commercial corridor.
yeah.
That it's what we're doing with that one is I don't know, more detailed, more specific than we would get into in your master plan because it's for a specific area.
Yeah.
But but we could certainly introduce the concept here.
Yeah, if you just introduce it's too big a broad a topic, I think, to bring in a master plan, but certainly the town could take an interest in investigating it further. I think it'd be a great step.
Is that something that would be a zoning law? Okay, so, yeah, this is terrific. I think the direction, that's a fabulous direction. I think we've got a planning board now that could do that kind of thing too, which has not always been the case.
Well, you know, our zoning bylaw, at least with respect to development, you know, it actually could use an update, because we have the open space bylaw that it's never been used. It's just on the books. Am I right, Patrick? It's never been used?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, no, we have a whole lot of bylaws that have never been used.
Right.
No question.
Well, but I mean, so that.
OSFPD, Great Estates,
that's
yeah, et cetera, et
exactly-
cetera, et cetera, yeah.
So maybe it's a time to rethink this.
I'm all for it. I think it's great. Go for it.
So much of that goes back to David Wanger's comment that land prices here are just so unworkable for typical development that just, you know, those bylaws have not occurred as a consequence.
No, everything's on the table at this point, but I think the transect, I love the transect idea, and
Isn't it good? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's the cart before the horse. I mean, so we can begin the discussion, but it's the master plan in some respects that's going to dictate how the bylaws are amended in one way or another. I mean, we could certainly start a discussion, but I don't know that the planning board in proposing amendments to the bylaws can get ahead of the master plan.
we know people who are gonna write this master plan, though. Right?
Do you?
The two need to be in concert, it seems to me. Am I correct, or am I off here?
No, I think you're right, Jack. I think, so I think what we're having this evening is a really great conversation around these issues, and it's helping me to formulate in my head a little bit more about the direction that we want to go in for this specific chapter. Sounds like it's helping you guys out too, which is great.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I would like to do is encourage folks, in the meeting this evening, to take a look at the information that we posted on land use so far, and the kind of comments that have been made so far, as well as the implementation, the land use implementation section. The land use implementation exercise that we had talked about having folks do. That's still all up on the Google Drive, and think through the kind of things that you might like to see with land use that, maybe there were things that have been expressed this evening you'd like to see a little bit more on. Maybe there are things that haven't been addressed so far that you'd like to see included, and try and give us those comments, because we can build that into the land use chapter. And then next time, I'd like to move forward with some more action planning. We've tried a couple of times to get to services and facilities, and we haven't quite got there yet, but I think that's the next one to do. And we will, we'll just continue to tackle these one or two at a time, if that makes sense to all of you.
Well, I think it's apropos, perhaps, Jim, too, just to point out in Eric's email about comparing housing and land use aspects of Hamilton with Essex County, because Essex County, we left the Merrimack Valley people, which is the other half of Essex County, behind a long time ago. We cut ourselves off here in the Ipswich River Valley as opposed to the Merrimack River Valley, because we didn't think we had any similarity to them. And so comparing us to Essex County is not really valid. Eric said in his email, he thought we could learn more by comparing our town to similar places, but I tend to think of Essex County, the whole northern section is Lawrence, Lowell, Haverhill, places like that, which I don't think particularly we want to emulate as a model for us to going forward. So he said he chose to compare it.
But their historical development is so much different than ours.
Exactly.
I mean, they're mill towns on the Merrimack River.
Exactly, exactly.
No relation to Hamilton at all.
No relation to Hamilton at all. So where he said he thought it was better to choose us to compare us to the county and not to towns like us, I think the towns like us would be instructive, because the towns like us generally aren't really like us. We are different because we have almost no commercial revenue sources, whereas the other towns do have revenue sources of one sort or another. So that's where the comparison, I think, could be instructive and helpful. And that's something I hope you'll pass along to Eric, because I much appreciated his explanation of why he did what he did, but I think it really points up exactly why it's not useful for us, that we are unique and we want to maintain what is unique and what we do love about this town, and steal whatever ideas we can that are useful from our peer towns around us, but not necessarily, hopefully we can learn from some of the things they did, which are not appropriate for us to look at, and the kind of development they've engaged in and things like that. Because they've grown by historical, by Topsy. We have an opportunity right now, I think, to do it differently and uniquely and hopefully better and smarter. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand what you're saying. If there are specific towns that you have in mind for that comparison,
the ones around us,
how about the contiguous communities, Jim?
It's the town. It's Ipswich, Topsfield, Hamilton, Wenham, Manchester, Georgetown. I don't know. I mean, it's the smaller towns around us, the ones that we're ultimately going to, I think, work out an arrangement for water supply, for example, things like that. And these are the towns where some of them front on Route 1. They have commercial development on Route 1. Some have, they've got different things that they've done, and that's where perhaps it's a useful format for us to look at.
So Eric and I did talk about that a bit, like Topsfield, Ipswich, those kind of places. One of the things that he said back when I suggested that is that, well, we could do that, but it's just going to tell you that Hamilton is like these other communities.
Well, but we aren't.
And it's probably not going to give you a lot of insights. So if it's something that you guys want to do, we could explore doing, an additional analysis like that.
Jim, is it at all relevant to what we're doing to understand why our population's been decreasing while apparently peer communities have seen an increase? Is that a relevant dynamic for us to analyze?
Probably, maybe. I'm not sure if that's something that we do through like an economic analysis or more of a demographic analysis.
I think Eric's comments are in that direction. And I'd like to know why. Eric said our population's been declining since the year 2000. So that would capture more than the Gordon Conwell phenomenon, I think.
Yeah.
And I think other peer communities have a reverse trend in terms of population.
I can tell you that the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission has, for at least 2.5 decades remarked to communities that are part of its 101 city and town district that our region is losing population. What is transpiring is we're becoming more like Europe every day, where they're also losing population as well. I think that, we can look at other communities, but they're also losing populations unless they're communities that have heavy migrant populations. Communities like Revere, Everett, Chelsea have had dramatic increases, but the vast majority of communities outside of the inner core have been decreasing.
I had understood it anecdotally that
Population decrease?
our so-called care communities have seen an increase.
So I apologize, but I do
Oh, we
have
have the hard
a
stop.
hard stop and
Yep.
coming up quick on it.
We got a minute.
So I just wanted to say, I believe our next meeting we're going to have scheduled for May 26th. Agenda items that I thought would be good to, it's a bogey in here, sorry about that. Focus on our, of course, status and continue, review of materials that have been posted on the Google Drive, and then action planning around facilities and services, and then if we, to the extent that we can get to them, some of these other topics too. So transportation, natural resources, cultural and historical resources.
Jim, do you have, as you put all the maps together, are they all on a GIS map that someone can go through with the layers, kind of turning things off of, the heritage areas and, vernal pools and certain I guess I think it's really important for us to see kind of in a map phase of what the existing conditions already are. And then to the point that's been made tonight is kind of what are these areas that are going to naturally emerge as options areas, and it would be helpful to see the mapping of existing conditions that you've already done, kind of walk us through that. If someone can share their screen through, with GIS and kind of walk through that a little bit, whether it's next meeting or another one, but I think, I don't know, at least for me, visually, it'd be nice to start seeing where kind of understanding the relationships that we have among this balance that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, let me see what I can do along those lines.
But if other members agree that that's a helpful exercise.
Oh, I definitely agree, because when I reviewed some of the maps, I was a little bit confused. I really was. I think I saw Groton House being residential.
Yeah, I think to layer it would be helpful to understand those relationships, because right now they're all separate.
I know some areas, as an equestrian, and I'm thinking, these are not really residential. They just seemed unclear to me, and I couldn't see the streets, so I couldn't nail it down.
Don't get me started on the streets.
Yeah, those maps were.
Yeah, we have to review them.
I apologize, everybody, but I really do have to go.
Anyway, okay.
All right.
Bye, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Yep, good. Thank you, Jim.
You're very welcome. Thank you, too.
Okay.
Jack, just along, he's gone now, but yes, but just to remind you that the planning board has an opening on the 7th of June in its agenda, whether or not this board wants to communicate with the planning board in some manner. That would be a great time to do it before we have a brief period between hearings on this project, which looks like now it's going to go toward the end of the summer.
Yeah.
Before decision.
So definitely.
My response to Emil on this question yesterday, day before, whatever it was I thought that would be a good opportunity to reach out to a group that we had not necessarily had a chance to get together with previous to this, and that it would be a very useful outreach to a group that will be closely involved. Do you want to do a joint meeting? What would you like to do?
I'm not sure how to set that up, but,
Yeah, especially Patrick, you're not going to be at the
Right,
June
I'll be
7th
away.
meeting. Rather than a joint meeting, I think if, you know, some representatives, someone, you know, people much more knowledgeable than me, because this is the first meeting I've been able to attend, but to fill the other planning board members in, and I know Rick will know, but just to kind of express what the process is here and how the planning board will fit into that process.
If we got everybody on the board at the planning board meeting that evening, would we be in trouble with the open meeting law?
No, all you have to do is post it for both of the meetings, or
So-
both of the groups,
We would have to post it,
yeah, and that's easy enough to do.
okay.
But maybe I misheard Marnie, or misunderstood, but it sounded like Marnie was saying it might be more helpful just to have us designate a representative to speak.
Well, but I think it
Yeah,
wouldn't, I think it wouldn't hurt to have, you know, everybody get to know everybody here. I mean, some of our members probably have never been to a planning board meeting, and so it could be useful from that standpoint.
I don't know that the steering committee could conduct business on June 7th. Because
Right.
you have a
Right.
different process than we do, but certainly everyone on the steering committee would be more than welcome to attend the planning board meeting and.
Yeah, no, just open meeting law-wise, though, would have to be posted
It
as
would
a
have to
joint
be
meeting,
posted.
even though in reality, the planning board would be running the meeting and we would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I would post it just to keep ourselves clear, and, you know, then everybody can come, or one or two people can come, and we'll certainly have somebody who will come and make a presentation if that's useful, and we,
I just wondered if Jim wanted some information from the planning board at this stage that we should start to consider as a board. That was really more the concern. We've given a couple of updates on the activity here, pretty
Let me make sure.
pretty broad. But
should the planning board make contact through you to Jim as a planning board matter,
Sure,
or
that's fine, I
is
can
that,
do that.
is that the way to do it?
No, that's perfectly.
And just, you know,
yeah, just-
copy us at the same time, so we know.
I'm curious how this would fit into his schedule to produce what he's doing, whether it would be helpful or not, you know, just.
You want to try and get him up? Or do you hybrid meetings?
Do what?
Do you do hybrid meetings?
No, actually, we do all
usually do
Zoom,
webinar
All
meetings.
Zoom.
webinar, yeah.
Yeah.
Webinar, virtuals.
It allows for up to 1,000 people. Yeah,
So-
because of 133 Essex.
Ah, so in any event, you're a Zoom meeting, and so
Yes.
anybody
Yes.
can come in, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we can ask Jim to
Sure.
attend if you'd like that to happen.
If that can fit his schedule.
That would be useful if he is available, because board members might have questions for him that
Right.
only he can answer, maybe.
Again, I will be gone.
Right.
On the 7th,
Right.
but, for that meeting, Kristen, would you mind to, do the Zoom?
Probably, yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
Probably yes, you
Say
would
it'll
do
be a
it, or
hybrid
probably.
meeting?
No, just,
No, but it's I mean, we would all just be joining their Zoom.
Yeah,
That would be the 7th,
The
but
7th.
then you meet. the
Oh, sorry,
following
I
Thursday.
misunderstood, sorry.
so for the 9th,
Right,
you want me to set up a Zoom for our meeting?
yes,
Yes, I can do that.
super, thank you.
what time on the 7th?
7 o'clock.
I just need to remind myself.
Did anybody ever figure out why we didn't have visual contact tonight?
No.
There's a misconnection between the
Is that-
HWCAM system and the display and the Zoom. And Bill didn't know what it was.
But hopefully he'll have it straightened out by the next meeting,
I hope.
Right,
inshallah.
because I couldn't pull up the Zoom on my phone. I couldn't get the link to open.
All right, so. Patrick, when are you leaving the week before?
I'm leaving on the, yeah, I'll be away beginning the 1st I'll be back the 13th.
Send, you send our agendas in Word, so I can just use one of those.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll get agendas and things set up for you.
right, I'll give you the Zoom link. Okay,
All right,
sorry.
so we'll announce that
If that didn't work,
to
that
the
doesn't-
committee.
I think that'll be interesting.
That's already posted, the 7th.
No,
Our
not yet.
meeting's
No.
not posted, no.
No.
So as soon as it's posted, people can get into it and figure out what's going on. Okay, good. All right, do we want to do any other discussion, or should we
I came in a
adjourn?
little late, I'm not sure exactly what we, so I apologize, but, we have new members, I don't know if we can, we all, I think, know of each other, but maybe go around for the, and as well for the room. I'll start.
Kathy Simons will be attending for at least a period of time while Lauren is out on maternity leave to represent
From the Conservation,
Conservation
yeah,
Commission.
excellent.
Thank you.
And
SIMON,
S.
okay,
Marnie's
Conscom.
visiting us from, or not visiting us, a permanent,
No,
a permanent new addition to our committee.
Barney Crouch is now a member, she's taken Rick's spot, and she's chair of the Affordable Housing Trust and the Planning Board, right? So there's a lot of horsepower sitting in this room at this point.
Actually, the horsepower's across the street.
Let's see, so did everyone hear that on, I know we don't have any visual, but everybody heard on the phone? Okay, good. Oh, I guess kind of visual.
I think they have we just don't have a visual, they do.
Yes, we could hear that. Thank you, Kristen. That was helpful.
Okay, good.
And then I'm back.
And
All right.
Rosie's back to stay.
I don't know if I was ever gone, but I was in limbo for a while, but just, you know that I'm back.
And then is Sean officially
I
joining us?
believe
Would appear, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
he's finishing up his, master's program,
Master's,
right?
yeah.
And which I think is the end of this month.
Yeah.
And so I think his plan, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Rosie, is that he will be attending as well
Yeah.
on behalf of the select board.
Correct.
So he will be the official select board, you will be a member at
I'm a
large.
member, right.
Or At large. And that's the way it is, okay. Any other questions on who's who in the zoo?
No, but I still, I guess I feel like the mapping issue is still, like, I haven't heard
nowhere.
any movement.
It's nowhere.
Just to the point that there's like 3 street names in the entire town of Hamilton on the map. And there's just, I mean, I know we need to help point out the errors, but I don't know, for some reason I feel like it's,
It's hopeless. But I'm gonna
the
try,
maps
and I
need
think
to
we do have
work.
a map, I'm gonna try and sort out which are roads and which are, which are actually bridle trails, and get that at least as far out of the way as possible, because,
Patrick, have you had any conversation with Jim about that task? And I know there's been a lot of back and forth about what's completed and not, but in my opinion, I think if our base map is so unreadable, it's not a completed task.
I will tell him again that we need more road identification on the maps.
Can we just use Google
Particularly.
Earth? I mean, is there a way of just using that?
Just screenshotting it and superimpose specifics, is that what
Well,
you're
they
saying?
should-
Perhaps, I mean, it just, because that's really
map.
more accurate probably than anything.
Well,
But
the
right,
other-
but they're putting all the existing conditions of like where everything is.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
And if we
very
want
hard
to have
read.
this like kind of figuring out, where everything is, to then we can understand where are the areas that we really do need to focus on to develop, preserve, et cetera. And then we have to have a conversation with
Well,
the public, we need readable.
And to Marnie's point, like, we are all very used to being able to use Google Maps to zoom down to I mean, you're used to being able to get that kind of specificity very quickly, and so it's really frustrating when you're not able to do
Yeah.
that, because, in other words, if we were doing this 30 years ago, probably none of us would be as concerned about the fact that the maps weren't that specific, but now we're really used to being able, when you look at a map, you're able to zoom in and really get clarity, and it's
See
not
the
that
car
way.
in your driveway.
Right, exactly.
It is amazing. It's a really.
Right,
good
and
tool.
it really needs to be that way because it is useful information, and it needs to be really accessible to people so that they can.
Right, and there's a way to do it. If you're on, GIS and you say, okay, at this, when I'm zoomed out this much, I see very few things. But as I zoom in, more layers can show up, and then it's readable, and then I can find my house, and you can what's next to my house, and but I mean, the people that were walking by at Shop Local, they were like, and then we started just writing names, because people like to orient themselves just naturally, and then go, and then think and absorb, and so.
Well,
It's all too complicated. I think we ought to just take the bridle trails. Something you can't drive on, I think we should take off the map.
Well, again, that might be layers, right? Like that,
You're
they're,
right.
like,
That
in other
might-
words,
that
like,
might be
You
a
need to show the
separate
bridle
map.
Mm-hmm.
trails.
right, it's like,
That might be a separate.
like that was on one of my comments on one of the maps was, I spent a long time trying to figure it out. I couldn't figure it out, and I finally figured out it was the railroad track. Like, I kept thinking, there is no road that goes this way. This is not, and it was like over and over, and I was like, I've lived here a long time. There is no road that goes like that. And it was the railroad track. But the map just wasn't clear. There's obviously a way to make a map where it's clear that this is a railroad track. Like that would have, so.
But I'd like to simplify. I think we would just sort of take the trails off.
I wouldn't, but
Actually, that's
At
part of the
what
open
level?
Right.
space
It is.
recreation.
Right, you could just, it's a layer.
layer.
That's a layer.
It's a
Okay.
layer that you could remove or put back on. Like, that's what it needs to be. It needs to be like, I don't want to see the bridle trails, or I do want to see the bridle
You know,
trails.
and another valuable part of that too is that that's a wildlife corridor.
Right.
right.
Well, it isn't, it isn't. They don't necessarily need a trail to go somewhere. Usually they make their own trails.
They make their own trails, but this is a preserved area that they have available.
Right,
I see them a lot.
yeah. Yeah, a whole bunch of them showed up behind our house the other morning.
Yeah.
Deer.
Wow.
I saw a fisher the other day too, over at Vineyard Hill. All right, well then maybe it's just a question of having a different color, because right now we have Cutler Road and the bridle trail are the same color.
Layers.
It's so much more than that.
It's layers.
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 Okay.
It's just, yeah.
All right, good. I wanted to make sure we got that straightened out. All right, anything else? Anybody wants to hit before we adjourn? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I think if you do roll call
David?
again, because you
Yeah,
have.
it's an aye. Kristen?
Aye.
All ayes. All right, we stand adjourned at 43.